Messy and masterful. In this podcast, we speak about the success of people who have achieved, built, or done something amazing, special, remarkable, noteworthy, and/or fabulous. Think of presidents, doctors, chefs, architects, filmmakers, writers, philosophers, CEOs, journalists, and the list goes on of people who've had a genuine impact on this world. But rather than underlining their career victories, we speak about the challenges they needed to overcome to actually get there. In each episode, we discuss 3 of such challenges, obstacles, difficulties, and/or hurdles with our guest, putting the messy of their lives next to the masterful. A very warm welcome to you. My name is Alder Pap, and I'm so happy you could make it. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here.
We focus on business books, but there's also a very strong self-development list as well. And the two really do blur, particularly for entrepreneurs. It's, if your business depends on your ability to be creative, to think well, to remain well, then actually a book that is about self-development is going to impact on your business and vice versa.
A very warm welcome to Messy and Masterful. And I am very excited that you could make it, and even more excited for the interview we're about to present to you. Because for this episode, I will be speaking to Alison Jones. And now this is an episode for those among you who love to read, and even more so, those among you who love to write. So get ready as I talk to Alison Jones. Alison is the founder of Practical Inspiration Publishing, and I speak to her about her journey as an author, as a coach, and a publishing entrepreneur. I love talking to Alison about her adventurous journey through the world of books, and I also loved discussing with Alison how a book basically is born, and how people come up with ideas and how these ideas get published. And on that note, I was very grateful that Alison and we worked together on getting a book proposal ready, more on that book and the proposal around that very, very, very soon. But Alison coaches first-time book authors to get their books published via something called the Proposal Challenge. And we have more information around that challenge available in our show notes. If you are interested in getting a book out there, if you have a good idea, then I would highly recommend you check out the Proposal Challenge. Now, without further ado, here is episode 64, the business book publisher, Alison Jones. Yes, and a very warm welcome. I'm very excited about this particular interview because it combines kind of 2 things that I very much personally love. I'm speaking to Alison Jones, and Alison is an entrepreneur, I might say, and a very feisty one, absolute hurricane. We'll talk about that in further detail. But then Alison is an entrepreneur in publishing, and she's also doing a lot of writing, and that specifically I'm very inspired by personally, because I do feel that the pen is a very mighty sword that can help us with a lot of things. So I'm very excited about this conversation. Alison, first of all, a very warm welcome to you.
Thanks, Aldo. Nice to be here.
I'm very happy that you said yes to this interview, and I also am very inspired by your journey. By means of a background in a long time ago, we worked for the same publishing house.
In a galaxy far, far away.
In a galaxy far, far away, exactly. We worked for the same publishing house. And I remember that not so far apart from each other, we both took the leap into setting up our own enterprise. And I also remember that before I took that leap, I had a quick conversation with you. Do you remember that conversation?
Oh, I do. Yes, absolutely. Okay. It was back in 2014, I think. Yeah.
Something like that. You had left already a little bit earlier, 2012, I read.
No, I made the decision to leave in 2012 because I was a director. Okay. That's when I found out. But it was 2014 I actually left. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we left at the same time. But I do remember that conversation because I was absolutely green to everything. I had a small idea that I had been testing on a Sunday afternoon, and I just wanted to do some fact checking with someone like you, and you very much helped me kind of at that moment. Little did I know that actually you had entrepreneurial plans helping a lot more people, and in a very particular way. Now, sorry, before I go on and talk, I want to get to the notion of helping others, because when I look at what you're doing and how you're doing it, I think that's a very strong theme for you. Am I correct?
Yeah, you absolutely are. I think publishing has always been a bit like this. As an editor, you're championing an author, so you're helping them work out what it is that they want to say and say it in the best possible way. But you're also championing the reader, because you're their ambassador. You're working with the author, but the author's cursed with knowledge, and you have to sort of supply the part of the reader in those early stages. And when you do, because I focus on business books, nonfiction, particularly in self-development, when you get it right, you're massively helping the author to articulate their knowledge. And you're also at the same time, and this is why it's such an amazingly brilliant job, you're helping people who don't know what they don't know, and they are picking up this book because something resonates with them. And by the end of the book, they have new tools and new insights. And so, it's this kind of magic of idea sharing that's why I've always loved publishing. And it goes both ways. I think, the author is helped by the process of writing and structuring and clarifying that goes on when you're writing a book, as much as the reader is helped by the reading of it.
Mm-hmm. And so you definitely apply that at your current publishing house, but you have an extensive career working for big publishing houses before that. Was that also your drive, that element of helping, working for these publishing houses, or was it something else?
Yes, it's interesting because I've always, as I say, been in nonfiction, and particularly before. So I used to work for Oxford University Press, working on the Oxford Companions, and I was working at Macmillan on the big reference projects there. And you're kind of supplying the infrastructure to allow a really major piece of intellectual property to come into the world. It's sort of cross between project manager and information architect and editor. It's quite a niche skill set, I think. You definitely have this almost business partnership with authors. I think I've talked to a lot of fiction editors, and they act very differently. They act more as counselors and sort of, midwives and sympathetic companions and cheerleaders. And there is a bit of that involved in being an editor. But actually, what you're doing is saying, okay, you know your topic. I know how to organize information and put it into a book that's going to be useful for a reader. Let's work together. And that's really satisfying.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about kind of your journey into publishing. And I want to go back to Alison, who just left uni and kind of said, like, here are going to be my first stops. Now what? I'm very curious. I'm very curious about her. Could you tell me a little bit more about her?
Yeah, she was a hot mess. She didn't know what she wanted to do. In fact, she thought she wanted to be a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
So I was actually enrolled on a CPE sort of conversion course from doing a degree to become an English language and literature degree to become a lawyer. And I literally woke up one morning and went, what am I doing? I don't want to be a lawyer. For a number of reasons. One, I was living in Edinburgh at the time, and I could, if I'd taken that conversion course, I'd have had to move to England. I couldn't have stayed in Edinburgh, which is ironic because I left Edinburgh in the end anyway, but there we are. But I just thought, I don't want to be a lawyer. So I think this was just before, like a couple of weeks before my finals, just really spectacularly bad timing. Wow. And I took some time out of revision because it was really troubling me. And I spent a day in a library reading What Colour is Your Parachute, and just thinking and sort of brainstorming, well, what am I about? What floats my boat? What the hell do I want to be when I grow up? And had a kind of epiphany of, oh, this is interesting. Books are the thing that actually I've always loved as a child, that I love as an adult, the writing of books, the dissemination of books, that lovely kind of blend of creativity and commercialism that is this publishing. And so I had a conversation with one of my tutors, who put me in touch with one of her friends who was an editor at Chambers in Edinburgh. And I left that casual chat with a contract to write a book.
Oh, wow, right away. Oh, wow. Okay. So they hired you to become an author.
Yes, I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? I'd sort of gone in for this chat at just the right time. They'd just been let down by someone who was supposed to write a book for them. And I think the question she asked was, can you write? And I said, yes, which was a real life lesson in just going with it and taking the opportunities.
Yes.
And I sort of walked out of this sort of casual chat with an agreement that I would write a sample for them for the Chambers Dictionary of Saints, and I did, and they liked it. And there I was, an author. And so for the next year or so, I was sort of writing a Dictionary of Saints by night, and I was working in Waterstones as a bookseller by day. Two amazing, those are the pointy ends of publishing, right? Writing the books and selling them. So it's great grounding in being a publisher. I didn't quite realize it at the time. I was just trying to make some money. But then about a year afterwards, I got an in-house job with Chambers as assistant editor.
Nice. And then from there on, Oxford University Press, Macmillan, how many publishing houses did you work with?
Yeah, so Chambers, Oxford University Press, and Macmillan. I had a brief stint with Reader's Digest, slightly surreally. But yeah, those are the major ones that I was working at.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I mean, so you definitely found your vocation, which was in the publishing field. But you also write, and you continue to write. And one of the books, I'm holding it here, is Exploratory Writing, which I find to be an absolute joy to kind of dive into, because you have a very, I hope you don't mind me saying that, you have a very non-pretentious way of kind of talking about something without it feeling like, sometimes I feel like, oh, that's such an absolute mountain to climb, and I'm never going to be Salman Rushdie, because he just has, he has so much skill, and he can find the words and they just keep on flowing. But what about the rest of the world who's not Salman Rushdie? Just to give an example, where do they start? And I actually think Exploratory Writing, which is a book that you wrote and also published, I think is a very good starting point, because basically your claim is, don't try to start off being a big novel writer. Just see how you feel. Just see what writing brings you, right? And start with that, and then build up from there. And then you basically do some hand holding with the people, throughout the process, actually throughout the book. Am I correct? Is that
absolutely?
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us are inculcated with this idea that writing is performative. So when you're writing at school, you're writing for your teacher who's going to judge it. And when we're writing in business, we're writing to communicate or to inform or influence or maybe even to entertain. We write so that someone else can read what we've written. And the point about exploratory writing is that before any of that, there's a kind of writing that you can do entirely for yourself, which is this really judgment-free space, which is it's a thinking tool rather than a communication tool. And it's that recognition is something I discovered myself, but it's also something that consistently I hear from authors who start writing a book because they want a book and they can see the value of that in their business and when they're working with clients and so on. But almost without exception, they say to me that the process of writing help them clarify their thinking. And you don't have to be writing a book ever to benefit from that. So it really was that kind of trying to just help people see that writing is so much more than we think it is, and that there's this liminal space between what's inside your head and what's out in the world that's a completely safe place on the page to write anything that comes into your head, and to make it as scruffy and as nonsensical and as ungrammatical as you like, because it's only for you, and it's so powerful.
Yeah, two things come to mind. One is, does everyone write for others to read it? That's an interesting notion. Like, is that why we write? Is that maybe non-consciously something that we do, that there's always a reader? I think
subconsciously we are performing. And even if you're journaling, I think you've got that sense of a future you reading this. Yeah. So what that means is we are subconsciously editing ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
And we know from all the research on creativity that any kind of censoring or editing or, judgment creeping in at that stage tends to restrict. So having a place that is, I just use a scruffy pad of A4 paper and it's gone afterwards. It's not, you don't keep this writing. It really is just to help you unspool the spaghetti in your head onto the page.
Yeah.
let's go to your challenges, because I have lots more questions that I want to ask about writing and publishing as well. But we also have, like, for every guest, your 3 challenges to discuss, because you were obviously very busy as a writer and then working for these big publishing houses. But then at age 29, you were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And could you tell a little bit about that, and kind of, being confronted with such a thing?
Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. So I have a condition called myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune condition where the nerve muscle junction is compromised. So there's an antibody that locks onto the muscle receptors and stops the signal getting through. So although there's nothing wrong with the muscle per se, it's not picking up the signal properly. And it particularly affects small muscles. So the first I knew about it was when I couldn't smile properly. And I'm a person who does a lot of smiling. So this was really distressing. And then I found speaking became difficult. I was speaking for a long period of time. It started to go quite nasal because I just couldn't maintain the tension in the mouth, and I couldn't drink out of a bottle. I mean, the most random things, and not symptoms that I recognised or that anybody else recognised, and they came and went. So I went to the doctor a couple of times, and they sort of looked at me oddly, and clearly you're fine, and I went away. But I was incredibly fortunate. I was working for Oxford University Press at the time. And a GP finally took me seriously and referred me to the Radcliffe Infirmary, where the one person who specialised in myasthenia gravis research happened to see me, and of course immediately picked up what it was. So I remember him saying, it's either muscular dystrophy, facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy, which is quite a mouthful, or it's myasthenia gravis. And we want it to be myasthenia gravis. So, and it's that odd thing, isn't it? When sickness strikes, your kind of relativity changes completely. So if somebody had said, would you like myasthenia gravis? I said, no, thank you. But if they'd said, would you rather have muscular dystrophy or myasthenia? I'll take the myasthenia gravis. Thank you very much. And that is what it was. And I underwent a thymectomy, which at the time was quite an invasive operation. You had to break open your sternum and take out your thymus gland. And there was no guarantee that it would work. It works in some patients. So you went through this, really major operation with a really significant scar that was, going to be there for the rest of my life. Might work or it might not. So it was a tough time. Just as you're kind of really establishing yourself professionally as well.
Yeah. And you were a mother of 2 at that time?
No, I wasn't even married at that time.
Oh,
so,
okay. No, I mean, I mean, your story, well, first of all, amazing, because the surgery did work.
It did work. I was one of the lucky ones. Yeah, absolutely.
And you're now asymptomatic, so things are going well for you, but you still need to be cautious, because you're never really completely resolved or completely cured from it.
That's it. They don't say you're cured, and the antibodies are still there, but in small enough quantities that they don't affect me. But you're right. I do notice it, particularly if I'm tired or run down, and at some point it could come back. So that you do sort of live with that, and it gives you quite a different perspective on life, I think.
Yeah. What it reminds me of is because I had to undergo spinal surgery in 2017, because they had found a benign tumor on my spine. But the other option was indeed MS. So they also spoke about that. And I did extensive testing with these little electric shocks through my system, through my legs, because I had a limp on my left leg that I had for years and years and years. And I was always in denial about it. So I always said, like, no, I'm not limping, because I genuinely didn't feel that I was limping. But when people were walking with me, such as my wife, she said, you're limping. I said, no, I'm not limping, and stop, you're imagining things, like, and then finally, after seeing, like, I don't know how many physiotherapists, doctors and whatever, there was this French sports doctor who says, like, listen, you shouldn't look at this muscularly. You should look at the nerves here, because there's something keeping you from doing that. And that got me on the right trajectory. Finding out that, like, look at the nerves, go talk to a neurologist or someone who knows your nerve system. And then they very quickly found that benign tumor that they surgically removed as well. And thank goodness that went well as well.
Fascinating.
But I remember him saying, we have good news, it's a tumor.
Yeah.
Right? Which is such a weird sentence. Yeah.
But it's all relative.
Exactly. And in the same euphoria, I was sitting there texting my mom Mom, it's okay, it's a tumor. So I'm like, so she must have thought, like, what kind of a message is this? I don't even think this is good news,
Because
right?
this is fixable.
Because this is fixable. That's exactly what it was. And I was genuinely with him in the euphoria part. Because, yeah, I mean, muscular dystrophy or MS is way worse, right? So
Not so fixable.
Yeah, not so fixable. So let's count our blessings. And,
Absolutely. And you really do. And that's the thing, isn't it? It makes you never see life the same way again.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, from my end, I mean, I think yours is, of course, a lot heavier. If I hear the symptoms, I just had the limp. But what was in my future was very gloom, right? So because they basically say, you're not going to be able to go to the bathroom normally and whatever if we keep that tumor there, and we need to remove it. So yeah, that wasn't something to look forward to. And you're right, I don't take it for granted anymore. Definitely not. Moving on to your next challenge, because it didn't make you any less ambitious. I can imagine you further worked on your career. You did it in the best way possible for publishing houses. But then in 2012, you knew kind of you were at the end of the road, with the publishing house you were at that moment. And then you decided, like, no, I'm not going to go to a next publishing house. I'm going to do something different. Yeah, talk me through the thought process here.
Yeah. So in 2012, I think about 6 months earlier, I'd been appointed director at Palgrave Macmillan, which meant, so I mean, career-wise, it's going great, and had 2 smallish children. And because I was director, I was then told that in 2014, we would be moving from Basingstoke, which is where the office was located, to London. And I'm sure most people listening would go, well, great. What a great move that would be. Why would you want to live in Basingstoke? I know, right? And I didn't want to live in London. I'd spent an entire career in publishing with only 10 months at Reader's Digest in London. I'd lived in Edinburgh, Oxford, and Bramley, which is a little village near Basingstoke. And I don't like London. You might think, why did you go into publishing? But I just don't like London. Didn't want to live there. Certainly didn't want to live there for 2 children. And knew, because my husband was working in London, so he was able to commute there and back only because I was there to take the kids to school and pick them up. Sure. And we couldn't both do it. So we'd have to move, or we'd have to never see the children. And so there was a personal dimension to it.
Yeah.
I think if we probably would have got through that if it had been the only thing. I don't know what would have moved, I suppose. But the other thing that was really in my mind was this kind of nagging feeling. This was, 2012, 2013, the digital revolution was happening. Publishing was becoming hugely disrupted. I sort of felt I was on the wrong side of history. Or I felt publishing was on the wrong side of history. So there was this huge movement, as you know, particularly in the sciences, for open access. Information wants to be free. Yeah. It's like that famous quote, publishing isn't a job anymore, it's a button. You press it and there you are, it's published. Yeah. And I just thought, I just don't see this lasting. I feel like, as Director of Innovation Strategy, which is what I was at the time, I'm trying to find solutions, but none of them are going to be satisfactory for publishing leaders who are used to making money out of the sale of content. And so I had so those 2 things together made a pretty compelling case. And I think I decided probably within 24 hours that this was my opportunity. So I'd done an MBA a few years earlier, and I'd been sort of talking in very general terms about one day starting a business. I was like, well, this is it. If not now, then when, you know? Yeah. And gloriously, because I had found out so early, obviously I had to keep that confidential, which was hard enough, but it gave me time. So it gave me time to do the inner work, to just adjust to that idea and to sort of think about what that might look like. But I also made a really conscious project out of using the time that I had left really effectively. So I started a private WordPress blog called What I Learned Today. And I used to sort of think onto that, I guess doing some exploratory writing. Yeah. And I also asked everybody I came across who ran their own business what they wished they'd known before they started. Yeah. So it was a real research project. And I was hugely fortunate to have the time and space to do it. And it made all the difference. Yeah.
And now looking back, was it a good decision?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny because people say, oh, do you wish you'd done it years ago? And I think, well, no, I don't actually. I think I did it at just the right time. Yeah. the tools would not have been available for me. The technology wasn't there to have a cloud-based remote business, which is what we are. Everybody who's on, staff works remotely from home, and the print revolution has happened, and therefore, we could do things as well as a traditional publisher without the big barriers to entry that would have been there 20 years before, 10 years before even then. And I think I didn't have the resilience, the confidence, the expertise to have pulled it off before then. Yeah. So no, I think it happened at just the right time.
Yeah. So, and out of that came Practical Inspiration Publishing, which is the publishing house you founded. Were you in 2014? Were you already set on that was it? What was
no, Practical Inspiration Publishing is our trading name as a publisher, and you're absolutely right. Now we are a fully fledged publisher, and we're up there with any of the big sort of business book publishers, which is terrific. But as I say, at the time, I had this strong conviction that publishing was broken, and so one of the things that I did during those 2 years was I retrained as a coach. I love mentoring, facilitating, training, teaching, coaching people. So I did that, and it was great fun. And you have to do a lot of practice sessions with clients. And so I was working with business leaders, with entrepreneurs. And as soon as they found out I was a publisher, all they wanted to talk about was publishing their books. Yeah. So it was a bit of a slow burn, but it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Actually, there's a business here. It's just a slightly different model.
What is that like if that people know you have a background in publishing, that they right away go like, oh, I have an idea for a book? It's like at a certain point you say, no, stop, I'm off the clock. I don't want to hear it. Or how does that work for you? Because that, and we're going to talk about a product that you launched kind of maybe because of that exact reason. But tell me a bit, what is that like? Do you ever need to get like impolite with people and say, no, not today?
The worst time was after the red-eye flight over to New York. I landed in New York at about 5 a.m. And I don't know if you've ever been, well, I'm sure you will have been, but I know, if you've ever been to those customs queues, waiting to get into JFK and the queue goes on forever and you're so bone tired and there's people standing around with, armed guards and everything. And I got to the passport control, so here on work. And he said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a publisher. And he went, oh! And he reached behind him to pull his manuscript out. But of course, you can't be rude at that point because this is the person who has the authority to send you back onto the plane, So I made all the right noises.
It was literally that person that had, oh my goodness.
The security guard. It was really funny. You can normally get out of these conversations by saying that you are a specialist in business books. People can put away their novels and their poetry collections, and that's useful. But you're right. Now I can sort of say to people, oh, that's fantastic. You've got a business book in you. Why don't you come along to the 10-day business book proposal challenge? Yes. And we'll test it out there. And that's been really helpful.
And that I think is a very clear interface from you as a publisher to the aspiring author to clarify their thinking and to make sure that you do not speak about apples and oranges. Because, if people come with their manuscripts or just their vague ideas, it's quite tiresome for you to process all these ideas. And I like what you said in the beginning of the interview. You said the author is cursed with knowledge. With knowledge and content. So sometimes it's a bit of an overflow that you need to steer it towards a product. And that's exactly what the proposal challenge does, right? It helps the author to maybe think about their work a little bit more as a product rather than just as some scribbles.
Yeah, that's exactly it. A book proposal, so for a non-fiction book particularly, so this is, for fiction it's different. For fiction, a publisher needs to see the manuscript. But for non-fiction, they don't want your manuscript. They want your proposal and some sample writing. And that's because many non-fiction publishers will work with you to develop the concept so that it works best for their list. Yeah. And all the questions that they ask you on a book proposal are questions that you need to know the answers to as an author. Yeah. So we start with the reader. Who is this for? What problem is it solving for them? How can you demonstrate that A, they have that problem, B, they are aware of that problem, and C, they are actively looking for solutions to that problem. Yeah. And then we go through the whole proposal, which is, things about the author biography, the sales marketing plan, the competing titles, the table of contents, all that kind of stuff. And because it's fast and furious, it is 10 days. So it can't be perfect. And there's great freedom in that. Just do it. Done is better than perfect is the mantra. And then you can shape it afterwards. And because it's in real time and because there's this kind of cohort of people going through it and there's real energy and fun involved in that. It's hilarious. I remember one of our authors was saying that it took him over 6 months to do his first book proposal. And, 10 days later, there he was. And he said, and it's better than the one I did first time round. So that was gratifying. Yeah.
No, definitely. And I also that you make it a group process, right? I think it's very good just to have feedback from others, who can help you turn the idea a couple of times around and look at it and see, okay, what's helpful here? What's your message to others? Another thing that I like about it when I hear about it and when I heard you speak about it previously is that it kind of also gives the author an idea of how much work it actually is to write and publish a book, right? It's not kind of for the lighthearted. You need to be willing and able to invest a considerable amount of time, right? It's not only about writing the manuscript, it's making it a readable manuscript that can go for, a scalable audience, really
and it's the sales and marketing piece as well. And writing the book is only half the story.
Exactly. And I think that's a part that not a lot of people are so aware of. They think, oh, here's my story. Of course it will sell. Like, well, no, maybe not. So I think that also, it gives a good idea of the mammoth task that you need to work through to make it a success.
And that's what I always say to business authors is like, how does this fit into what you want out of life professionally and personally over the next few years? Because this is going to take a lot of your time and energy and attention, and they are the scarcest resources that you have. So if you are clear about why you're writing this book, what it's going to make possible in your business, how it's going to deepen your mastery and take you in terms of your self-development in the direction you want to go, because it's an incredible opportunity. If you're writing a book, you can reach out to people you would never normally have an excuse to reach out to, and you can engage them in conversation, and you can, it opens up opportunities and it allows you to research things in depth. But if that direction isn't taking you in a way that's useful for your business, or in a direction that's actually really going to develop you in the way you want to go, then you're kind of sabotaging yourself.
It helps you also to be consistent to what you are doing, like and how it helps you. So it's a very good mirror on that level. So now you're almost 10 years old with your entrepreneurial adventure, and you write that down as your last challenge. It's kind of like, you're grateful for the journey, but your well-being in the journey was also very important. Before we address your well-being, could you just give me a little bit of an idea of how many books you've published thus far, how many authors you've worked with? Because I'd love to hear.
I think we're just about to hit 180 books.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's not an insignificant number.
No, very productive. Yeah. And how many books a year on average do you publish?
It's around 35 books a year, something like that. It wasn't obviously in the early years, but that's sort of where we're at now.
And they're all kind of business focused, so advisory towards business.
Yes, we focus on business books, but there's also a very strong self-development list as well. And the two really do blur, particularly for entrepreneurs. It's, if your business depends on your ability to be creative, to think well, to remain well, then actually a book that is about self-development is going to impact on your business, and vice versa.
Yeah, nice. I wanted to ask if there's any specific reason that you carved out that niche, but I think you've already answered. You came from a coaching background as an entrepreneur, and then you obviously love the coaching bit. Otherwise, you wouldn't have stayed with it. I
do, but you can coach people brilliantly, of course, as a fiction book coach as well. But I personally, I think this is going to be news to anybody. Publishing is not a very good way to make money. It's just not. It's not great for publishers, which is one of the reasons it's in such trouble, because the margins have always been thin, and now they're just brutally tight. Which is why publishers end up publishing celebrities and nobody else, because they know that they can sell them. But as an author, you're really not going to make a huge stack of cash from. I mean, that's not fair, actually. Some of our authors make really good money from their books, but most don't. Most will sort of cover their costs and not much more than that from the book sales directly. So if you own a business, thinking about the value of that intellectual property as an asset in your business, what does it make possible? Does it get you, for example, speaking gigs? Because most people who are booking speakers are looking for people who are authorities. Authorhood is a sort of qualifier for that. Does it allow you to include the book in consulting packages or, in interventions that you do with organizations? Can you get business from it? So doesn't it position you as the leader in particular, so people will call you up and get business? Because if you can get a big piece of business from the sale of your book, or even just giving your book to somebody, frankly, that's probably going to be more than the royalties for the year. Yeah. So thinking about how the book fits with and works with your business is so important for business authors. And that's when the value of the book as a cultural object, as a sort of piece of intellectual property, just makes really good business sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also what you specialize in. Again, carving that way, making sure it fits with the author, it fits in the entire.
And that's what traditional publishers, of course, don't do, because they make their money exclusively from the sale of the book, so they don't really care about your business. Whereas, because we're working in a partnership with the author, and then we take the time and trouble to go, well, what is the business? How is this going to work? What's the model we're developing here? And it really is that upstream work around really identifying the intellectual property, shaping it effectively, and thinking how it plugs into the business.
Mm-hmm. And so do you have returning authors as well?
Yes, which is great when you get new editions and new books from existing authors. Yeah,
that's good, because then they really...
Yes,
they've really got the spirit, so they keep on writing. Because I've once had the privilege to meet Deepak Chopra, and he's an absolute writing machine. He pushes out, I think, 2 books a year, easy.
It is addictive. It's amazing. Yeah. Even people who say, I've only got 1 book in me, and then they sort of phone me up and go, I thought about it. There is something incredibly satisfying about the process. And it is, once it's over, I'm feeling it already. I'm feeling the itch to involve myself in a really book-sized project again. There's nothing like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how that is. But I mean, kind of the people who sell books are often also content machines, because they keep on writing, they keep on pushing out. So there's a reliability that starts coming along for the publisher as well. And if you know that it sells, then why not try another one, right?
Exactly.
That's also good. Yeah. Which one's your favorite book that you've published?
Oh, don't do that to me. They're all my favorites, Aldo.
Well done. I thought I'd just sneak it in there. But I knew you were going to answer that. Yeah, I knew you were going to answer that. No, let's talk about your well-being, because, and I recognize that very much when you sent us the challenge before the interview. You said, all nice and lovely when you start your own enterprise, but it isn't kind of this very dreamy existence. It's, in the beginning, quite difficult, quite chewy.
Terrifying.
Right? Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the beginning, kind of what the part that was terrifying?
It's funny. It's like suddenly there's no ceiling, which is really exciting. It means you can fly. And there's no floor, which is really terrifying, because it means you can fall, and there's nothing to hold you. There's not that kind of sick pay or performance reviews. You could, if you fail, you lose your house. It's that kind of, and that's what I was catastrophizing about at 3 a.m. I think, anybody, I've spoken to so many people about this since, and I thought I was uniquely cursed. I thought it was just me that woke at 3 a.m. panicking. Apparently everybody does it. So this is good to know. It's good to know. Otherwise you can feel you're very alone. So there was a particularly challenging sort of cash flow situation in the early days of the business, and I thought it was probably going to be all right, but I wasn't sure. And there's layers of anxiety, isn't there? There's that immediate thing. Am I going to get this late invoice paid before that bill has to be paid? But below that, there's the anxiety of, I can't be having this every month end. What's going on? What have I done? What have I done was a question that came up a lot. And then below that, there's that, I'm not fit to run a business. I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. And so it just cascades down at 3 a.m. It just all looks hopeless and bleak. And you think, what am I doing? And so that particular night, I did what occurred to me, which is I grabbed a pencil and a pad of paper, and I just started writing. And it was so raw and ugly. And within minutes, I had noticed that the writing had changed things. And this is where I discovered for myself the power of exploratory writing, not just for thinking, but for managing your state. So within a couple of minutes, I was calmer, because there's something about taking action, and there's something about the speed of the pen on the page that slows your thoughts down. And my breathing regularized. And that was great. And I kept writing, and I found myself writing something like, I wonder if, and within this few minutes, I had a plan for a new product that I could launch quite quickly. And that absolutely blew my mind, that I could move from this state of kind of inarticulate, limbic sort of panic just by literally grabbing a pen and paper. Within a few minutes, I was in a more rational state, and I was coming up with creative ideas, that I could implement. So it felt magical, and I wondered if it was a fluke. And I tried it out a few more times, and every single time the same thing happened. And that's, I guess, the personal story behind exploratory writing, is that I want people to realize that they have this incredibly simple, lightweight tool at their disposal whenever they need it, including 3 o'clock in the morning.
So it offered you not only that relief, because you have this anxiety and kind of, you want to relieve yourself of that anxiety. So you write down your feelings. It also offered you kind of this gateway, this opening into a new idea.
Into a new, more expansive, creative sort of space. Yeah. So they call it, psychologists call this affect labeling, is that when you give words to the state that you are feeling, to the emotions that in itself reduces their power. It gives you more of a sense of self-efficacy, of agency, of control, which is often what we feel we're lacking in that sort of state.
Yeah.
So that's a very well documented, and it's used obviously in talking therapies a lot. But do you know what? 3 a.m, you don't always have somebody there to talk to.
No.
And they're probably going to be cross if you wake them up and try and engage them in this conversation. But you always have a pencil and a piece of paper, and the fact is you can do this for yourself so effectively.
Yeah. What I remember from when I started Teach Pitch back in also 2014, so also going on 10 years, is that I took it so personally.
Yes.
I'm now completely done with it's not me personally. It's a business idea. It either works or it doesn't, but it is no reflection on who you are personally. I could not make that distinction when I started this journey.
Yeah.
I was like, no, this is me. This is everything that I am. If the business fails, I fail. There's no kind of two ways of going about it. Whereas I'm happy. So I'm completely relieved of that thought. Did you have that as well? That it was
yes,
you?
Absolutely. And also by extension, if somebody doesn't buy your product, they don't like you and they don't think you're good at it. And so there's this unhelpful identification of yourself with the business and the proposition.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
And it's just data, it's just data. And seeing that and seeing your ability to develop, to change, to evolve, to make the business different and better, you have to separate yourself from it before you can do any of that, I think. Otherwise, you just become entrapped in it.
Yeah, and because if I look back now, then I'm pretty sure there were enough people around me that had that message for me, right? That could have said things that would have mitigated my anxiety, or that would have helped me to kind of get through it. But for some reason, I didn't really listen to that. I think there was also, with that anxiety, I kind of closed myself off a bit, because I really needed to be successful. So I was really so that anxious. That's like, and I can imagine that writing also opens you up a little bit more. It's like, listen, what's the problem? Start writing. Yes. So you find the words for what's bothering you. So at least you can talk about it, or you can let other people in.
Yeah. And they say, don't they, that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And very often, when I was kind of unpacking those layers of my anxiety, it wasn't just this one thing, it was all those things below it. As soon as you've articulated that, it's like, it loses its power, because you can look at it and go, well, that's obviously ridiculous. And that's really helpful. And you can recruit other people into exploratory writing. So, I do this a lot. What would my current business crush, what would they say about this? And you can or sort of recruit external coaches any moment of the day or night. If I'm reading a book by someone and I'm particularly impressed by their argument, what would they say if I was in conversation with them? And of course, it's an act of fiction, it's an act of imagination, but it's no less powerful for that, And you can almost treat yourself, what advice would I give to someone in this situation? Because we're able to be so much kinder and more objective and more helpful for other people than we are to ourselves. So you can play with that writing, in a way that novelists play with writing and voice and tone and character, and that's all super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. No, it definitely is. So exploratory writing. So for those of you who are thinking about getting creative, or who are thinking about starting their own enterprise, or are thinking about further developing themselves, let's start writing first. By the by, I journal. There you go. I do the bullet journal system, and I've been doing it for 4 years. But this is the first year that it's really paying off.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Because I started it and I was consistent in doing it, but I noticed that further down the road I kind of gave up a little, or it kind of deformed into something else. It didn't become daily. It became like thoughts and whatever. And what you earlier said about being resilient, I said no, this has got to help. And now it's the first year that I'm really kind of okay. I know what to put in it. I trust myself as well. Just writing things down and kind of doing those the bullet points, that is. So I'm not like, oh dear journal, today this happened or that happened. Not at all. It's more like a task list mixed with kind of other observations and other ideas and kind of whatever. And that mix brings something very nice that I all just bring back to the same notebook essentially. So it's kind of
it's such a good daily discipline, isn't it?
I love it, and it's again also it comes to exploratory writing. As soon as I write it down, it offers relief because it brings structure into my day, into the things that I want to do, into things that I want to succeed in, kind of all bits and pieces, bringing that together. But again, it doesn't happen overnight. It really, as I said, like this is year 4, and now I feel the benefits. In the first 3 years, definitely bits and pieces, but now in year 4, I really feel like, oh wow, now I'm getting kind of, there's so much coming out of it because I'm just applying it. I know how to apply, and mainly I trust myself. I think that's just one thing. In the beginning, when you start writing, you don't really trust yourself because you think like, who wants to read this? Like who's going to be interested in this or something like that? That's why I asked, do you always write with someone else in mind, or do you write for yourself? And I think you write because you want someone to read it, either consciously or subconsciously. I'm over that now. Sorry.
Yeah, releasing that can be really helpful. But I'm also interested in that discipline point and the fact that the consistency delivers such a reward, because that's another huge principle of my life, I suppose, is that, designing those kind of daily habits that even when you don't want to do them, you do them because this is the person you want to be. So I run every day. I've run every day for over 5 years now. And it's, do I ever want to go out for a run in the morning? Almost never. Do I ever regret it when I come back? Never. I build that habit in. It's non-negotiable. It's not will I run, it's when will I run today. Similarly with writing, I've got a sort of 5 sort of, habits that I just do every day. And I think if you sit around waiting for the inspiration for these things, you're going to be probably waiting quite a long time. But if you know the person you want to be, what does that person do? And you make these things really small. My run has to be 2 kilometers minimum. It doesn't have to be any longer than that. My writing sprint is 6 minutes. So you make them so small that there's not much resistance there. And then it's the consistency over time.
I like what you're saying. Don't make a big thing out of it as well. I think people, it's almost an existential question. Shall I go to the gym today? Yes or no? And then you bring in so much with that question, whereas just go, right? Maybe not to the gym, I'm going to go outside, but just go do something and don't make a big thing about it. Like if you make it small, that just helps. Because my journaling is not, it's not it's not poetry every day, right? It's just sometimes like literally do groceries or kind of something like that. But that at least I'm working on it, right?
Yeah. And you set yourself up to succeed, and that's the key thing about habits. The BJ Fogg Tiny Habits thing. Habits form. This is Charles Duhigg as well, isn't it? They form with that with success. So if you make it really small and you achieve it, you're laying down the neurological foundation of embedding that habit. Whereas if you set yourself a big target and you fail, it's the opposite.
No, definitely. That's also the what is it? James Clear, who talks about
atomic habits. Exactly. Yeah.
He says, don't make them difficult. Don't make gigantic hurdles, because then you're never going to do it. Make it easy. Make it accessible, and just do them. Right. And also know that you're going to have to ask yourself the question every day. Like I like how you've reframed the question from,
it's when am I going to do this?
When are you going to run?
Qualitatively, it's a completely different question. And it doesn't take any willpower. It just takes a bit of logistics, a bit of light planning.
Yeah. And you have 2 teenagers now, and you just said they're still sleeping. 'Cause
They're
it's
still
summer holiday.
sleeping.
But
It's holidays.
yes. But did you feel it was more difficult, kind of when they were smaller? I mean, because like
Yeah, running every day was more of a challenge when they were tiny,
Yeah.
and I had to be smarter about
Yeah.
the logistics.
Yeah.
They used to come with me quite often, which is really lovely as
Oh,
well, on
nice.
their bikes and stuff,
Okay. Yeah.
which is great. And
Yeah.
what I also love is that they've grown up just thinking this is completely normal. It's completely
Yeah.
normal for
Oh,
mum
no, that's
to,
good.
to
Yeah.
that's what she does,
Yeah.
which I think is it's a
It's
great
good.
way of
Yeah.
modelling
Yeah.
good habits, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 But you're right. No, I think everything is so much easier once you can actually leave the house with the children in it.
Yeah. No. But I mean, I think that's one of the hurdles that people often come up with. It's like I don't possibly have the time because I have this, I have that, I have that, I have that. But that's also a hurdle. That's a mental blocker you build for yourself. Whereas, like, listen, we all need to cope with this.
Yeah.
You know, just find the time and also do something that really, literally energizes you.
Yeah, and for you, if you do have small children, if you aren't able to get out of the house, maybe it's not running. You know,
Yeah.
I know I'm
Yeah.
privileged to be able to get out of the house, and you know, I also have a dog now who needs running. So you know,
Yeah.
but maybe it's, I don't know. In lockdown, I started my press up challenge. I did one press up was all I could manage, one full press up. I'm now doing 25 a day, and that's
There you
a
go.
sort of habit there. And you know, I don't take my muscles for granted now. You know, I really,
You need
I
to.
know that they have to be more efficient because one day the myasthenia might come back. I might need them to work really well with a reduced, you know, nerve impulse. So, you know, find what works for you, but just commit to it.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's lovely advice. Thank you so much, Alison. We're almost at the end of this interview, but I always have 2 questions that I ask each and every one of my guests. Before I do so, sorry, I have one more. I just want to test that one. See if you can have an answer to it. If you could finish this sentence. As a child, I wanted to become a
ballerina.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if I'd like to go back and slap that child now.
Why? That's a beautiful profession.
Yeah. Anyway, I really wish it had been like marine biologist or something, something more interesting.
No, I think that's. Do you remember why? Was it the pink, or was it the music, or?
Oh, I think it was everything, and I think that's what I think. It was also embedded in a kind of cultural sense of what it meant to be feminine, and I think there's an awful lot of unhelpful stuff packaged in there, which is why I would like to go back and sort of have a strong word with that child.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
That's right. Shall we look at some alternatives, love?
Yeah. My daughter has chosen, she's 4, to become a mummy princess.
A mummy princess, lovely.
So mother, but
no cultural expectations embedded in there at all. Okay.
No, and my wife is kind of, she's always tried to incentivize president, minister, scientist, kind of whatever. She steers away from the pink and whatever, but it always comes back. So my wife is the first one's like, oh my goodness, how do we get to this? No, back to the drawing board. But she's absolutely fine with her mummy princess choice at age 4, and I fully support her.
Hopefully it'll change by age 12.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Now to the more serious questions. One is about reading. So, you're 10 years in with your beautiful publishing house, Practical Inspiration Publishing, the Proposal Challenge, and your book, Exploratory Writing. What is a book that really was a life changer for you?
That's a great question, and there are so many. I'm going to come back to one. Yeah, I know. And I always go to this because it really genuinely has stayed with me through the years. And it's Gay Hendricks' The Big Leap. It's just a brilliant self-development stroke entrepreneurial book. And he's a lovely man. I spoke to him on the podcast a few years back, and he is everything when you read a book and you sort of feel that you know the person and you like them, and then you meet them and they're just awful. I met him and he was everything I'd hoped and more. So that was really lovely as well. But he talks about your zone of genius and how most of us spend time in our zone of competence or our zone of excellence, but not in our zone of genius, and how important that is for sort of fulfillment and also for doing your best work in the world. And he also talks about the upper limiting problem and our ability to sabotage ourselves when we feel we're becoming tall poppies, or we're doing too well, or we're tempting fate somehow. And both of those resonated with me so much, and I come back to them again and again and again.
Wonderful. Well, that's a very heartfelt, real recommendation. Guy Hendricks, The Big Leap.
Gay Hendricks, yeah.
Gay Hendricks, and I'll be sure to put it in our show notes for people to find out the book. It's a good recommendation, and I'll definitely follow up. I'll put it on my reading list as well. I'm always up for books like that. I hadn't heard of it before, but it's a
classic.
wonderful book. Yeah. And now, because you are working for a publisher, any book you would like to recommend that you're inspired by with Practical Inspiration Publishing? That you want to
which is a kind of sneaky, different way of asking the question you asked before about which is my favorite.
No, maybe not. Maybe it is, maybe not. I'll let you be the judge of that. Maybe from this year, right? So maybe one.
Well, actually, one I'm going to tell you about is one we're going to be doing a new edition of next year.
Okay.
But it remains, I think, one of the most culturally important books we've ever published, which is The Long Win by Kath Bishop. And she's talking about how we construct success and winning and how toxic that is in so many ways. So Kath Bishop is an Olympian, and she won silver at the 2004 Olympics. And as she crossed the finish line, she starts with that story of crossing the finish line in second place and just not knowing how to feel. Because on the one hand, she's just won silver medal in the Olympics. On the other hand, she's just lost the goal. Exactly. So it's a really powerful story. Yeah. And then she goes on. So after her Olympic career, she became sort of an international conflict resolution expert. Now she's a leadership coach. She's one of those people that makes you wonder what you've done with your life, But she explores that idea of winning and our narratives around it, and what we miss out through that real kind of binary approach to winning or losing in the fields of sport. And of course, that has been visible in so many stories recently about the lack of concern for athletes' well-being and the impact on people's mental health, on the hollowness that people have reported even when they've won. If winning's not winning for the winners, something really badly wrong here. Through business, through government, through politics, into education, and just really explores what it. So the long win is a sort of different way of looking at winning, and it's a much more process focused. It's much less win-lose. It's just a really beautifully written, powerful, thoughtful book. And we're doing a new edition to coincide with the Olympics in 2024. So.
Wow, no, that's definitely worth everyone's reading time. And also, you don't realize that the fact that they're disappointed because they got silver, right? It's not gold, right? It's like whereas
apparently the happiest person is the bronze, because they're on the podium. And they could so easily not have been on the podium. So it's really interesting. Again, we're back to everything being relative.
No, definitely. Very last question, Alison, and also here, because I know you have a podcast. You interview authors of your books, I believe. So it's
lots of different authors. Not just our books.
Okay. But so now it's the Alison Jones podcast. And who's your dream guest? Who would you like?
So, the podcast is the Extraordinary Business Book Club podcast.
Okay.
And it's for writers and readers of extraordinary business books. Yeah. And I would love, and she's never answered me, I'd love Brene Brown. I'd love to have Brene Brown on there. But I've asked, it's not that I haven't asked her, and it's not that she said no, but it just went into the massive crater of requests for Brene Brown's time and attention. And
I mean, maybe I'm asking for the obvious, but why? What is it about Brene Brown?
Have you read any of her books?
No. So that's why I'm saying I'm asking the obvious question. Yeah. I've listened to her podcast.
Books are superb, and I've listened to her read her audiobooks as well. And like Gay Hendricks, I guess, you leave one of her books with the sense of knowing her, which is one of the things that books can achieve that other things just can't. You just spend so long with somebody else's voice, either literally if you're reading an audiobook or just, through the pages in your head. And their approach to life, their turn of phrase, their thinking, it feels so familiar to you, and you feel as though you have a relationship with them. And of course you don't. They have no idea who you are. But every time I finish a book by Brene Brown, I just want to go out for a drink with her. So
yeah. Making friends. Well, that's good, and that's a very well thought of and outspoken guest. Often people answer like, "Oh, can I have two? Can I have three?"
Oh, I mean, I want 15, but that's the one
I want
that
15.
immediately comes
Yeah.
to mind. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my experience with the podcast of Brene Brown is I had a guest, Dr. Mark Brackett, on this podcast, who has founded the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And he was also a guest on Brene Brown's podcast. But I listened to that podcast way back when, kind of a year before I got to interview him. But I so vividly remember that interview. So, because it was, the pandemic had just started, it was a lockdown, it was extremely hot outside. I remember it was summers. And then he spoke about the fact, like, he was bullied at school, and he speaks about his uncle who helped him through that. And then, from there on, he said, like, it's so important how we feel emotionally. And when you ask, how are you? Don't just ask it as a kind of, hi, kind of as just the slogan you feel you need to say. Literally, genuinely ask people how they are doing. Otherwise, don't even ask, right? Kind of that advice. So Dr. Mark Brackett was just such an eye-opener for me. And I said, like, I feel like I've known you. It's like, how come that, it's because I listened to the Brene Brown podcast. So yeah, that's my experience with Brene Brown, that, the way she interviewed that guest really had an impact on me. And I was so pleased to have one of her guests also on this podcast. So anyways.
It's like having Brene by association.
Brene by association, exactly. I'll take it.
Second degree Brene.
Second degree. But I didn't have you by association, Alison Jones. Thank you so very much for this interview. Exploratory Writing, Everyday Magic for Life and Work, a beautiful book that you can get on Amazon.
Or anywhere you buy books.
Or anywhere you buy books, exactly. Sorry, not only Amazon. And then there is the Proposal Challenge. And remind me, so that you do 3 per year. So this is for people who take their writing seriously and who would like to send a book proposal, and you would help them kind of to carve that out further.
Yeah, it says if you've got an idea for a business book and you don't quite know what to do next, then it's really to help you just clarify and articulate and sharpen up the case for the book, but also the case for the book for you in your business, which is a bit that publishers don't talk about. So it runs in September and January and April each year, and there's a maximum of 35 people on each running. So yeah.
So, and this one is, so your opportunity would be there in September
2023, or if you've missed that one or it's full, it's January 2024. So if you just go to proposalchallenge.com, you can always see what there you go.
That's the one.
That's what you need.
The URL. Yeah. Alison, it's been such a great pleasure talking to you as always. Keep up the great and amazing work as a publisher as well as an author. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more, not only from you, but also from the authors you push out there.
Thanks,
thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, it's been so much fun. Thank you.
If you liked this episode, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Philip Anderson for our beautiful theme music. This episode was edited by Natalie Piles with production assistance from Genta Metalia.